jetzt mal unten, warten dann noch 5 oder 10 Minuten.
Vielleicht kann mir jemand eine Nachricht schreiben, sobald ihr anfangt, dass ich nicht einfach reinkomme und ihr nur dabei seid.
Wir haben gesagt, wir lassen die Tür offen.
Wir lassen die Tür sowieso offen. Anytime you're ready, Craig.
Okay, we are.
Okay, everybody, we're about ready. Hello, everybody out there in the whole wide world. We're coming to you from Weimar, from Yiddish Summer Weimar, and this is the first of our new lecture series curated by Craig Udelman. It's called The World of Kiselgof Makonovetsky lecture series, and the purpose of it is to investigate the historical and the cultural context of the music that was collected by the Kiselgof Machinawetsky, the Kiselgof, well, we call it the Kiselgof Machinawetsky Digital Humanities Manuscript Project, but it refers to the Onski Expedition, to music that was collected more than 100 years ago. And that is the subject of this year's Yiddish Summer Weimar. So as fitting, the first of these lectures is going to be done by Christina Crowder, who is the executive director of the Klezmer Institute and the director of the KMDMP project. And she is going to be joined today by Abigail Riceman and by Hannah Ochner, two people who are here in Yiddish Summer and have played an important role in Yiddish Summer and in the development of the KMDMP project. So without further ado, let me introduce you and welcome them with me.
Hey, everybody. It's great to be here with everybody today, and I'm here to speak about the Kiselgof Machinawetsky digital manuscript, and I apologize that that's a huge mouthful, but it is very descriptive of what we're doing with this work, and the short version is KMDMP, Kiselgof Machinawetsky Digital Manuscript Project. And can we leave that door open, please?
I think the lid.
Yeah, great. So I'd like to, before we get started here, thank Yiddish Summer Weimar, Alan Byrne, for having us here to jump right into phase 3 of our project. I'm going to explain all of these things in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, but this project is a means to connect musicians and scholars and Yiddishists today with music from about 100 years ago. Music that hasn't been performed for the most part, music that hasn't really been seen for the most part in all of this time for a whole number of reasons, some of which we'll get into today. But while the digital manuscript project, part of the project is about digital humanities and taking things that are analog and making them putting them into digital spaces, what we're doing here in Yiddish Summer Weimar is performing and transforming the music that we find. And so we're really delighted to be here to be able to do that exact thing, sort of leapfrogging way ahead in the long arc of the project. But what is this? But what is this stuff? What is this project? What is this stuff? The material that we're working with is approximately 850 high-resolution photographs of original music notation manuscripts that are held at the Vernadsky National Library of Ukraine. These musical notation manuscripts contain approximately 1,400 melodies. The vast majority of these melodies are instrumental klezmer music with a large sprinkling of liturgical material and Hasidic nigunim. A couple of songs here and there, but mostly instrumental klezmer music. And what makes this project special is that and there's a lot of things that make it special. One is that this is one of the first projects that's been able to take material that's been sort of largely locked away behind the walls of an archive and make it available to the public, to anybody who is interested in seeing it. And that's one of the core tenets of this project. And we feel that by making this material available for the first time, we've increase the amount of klezmer music available and easily accessible to anyone around the world by a factor of about 5. Oops. Okay, so how did it happen? Sometime in the early 1910s, a wealthy banker donated some money so that a bunch of St. Petersburg intellectuals could travel from St. Petersburg out into the Pale of Jewish settlement in what we call today Ukraine and Belarus. This expedition involved, is referred to as the Onski Expeditions, and they went out from 1912 to 1914. These expeditions were going out into this Städtlech, into the small towns of this region in order to collect folklore, folk music, tales, stories, legends, all kinds of what was perceived to be the sort of authentic folk culture of the Jewish people of Eastern Europe. And so the musical part of the collecting was handled by a gentleman named Kiselgof, Zinovy Kiselgof. And he went out with, I think, some of his students. He went out himself. And during the course of these expeditions, they recorded something over 1,000 wax cylinders. And they also collected, countless pages of manuscripts directly from Klezmorum. And they also had notes that they wrote down in the field. What we have as part of our collection is only a small portion of those larger notes and of that larger collection. As these expeditions returned back home to St. Petersburg, the materials were sort of housed in various places. Some of them ended up in St. Petersburg and some of them ended up in Kyiv. And to make a very long story very short, because we have a very short amount of time today, I'm just going to say that the Onski expeditions were cut short by the advent of the First World War. And then after that, the rest of the 20th century happened. Lots of things happened in the 20th century. All of them are very important, but they're not quite important to this particular story. Except to say that until the Berlin Wall came down and until the into the early 90s, Western access to Eastern archives was almost non-existent. It was virtually impossible for any Western researcher to get access to any kind of material that was behind the Iron Curtain. And this includes musical material, but also historical data and all kinds of things. So for us, for the majority of the Klezmer revival period, this material, while it was known to have happened, and it was known to, these Onski expeditions were known to have taken place, it was not even really possible to contemplate whether or not we could actually get the material. The one thing we did have were collections from Moshe Beregovsky, who was a great Russian Jewish ethnomusicologist, and many people in Klezmer land will know that name very well. And we're all, many of us are very familiar with the works of Moshe Beregovsky. Jewish instrumental folk music is one of our seminal collections. But sort of skipping ahead to 2017, my colleague Walter Zev Feldman was in Japan. He was in Tokyo giving a lecture about Jewish music, Jewish dance. And while he was there, he happened to do a special presentation with our friend, a great friend of Yiddish Summer Weimar, Tsutoshi Hinoe, and also attended by Mariko Mishiro, who was also a great participant here at Yiddish Summer Weimar for many years. And Mariko had her friend Anna Rogers, or Anna Gladkova, as she was known at the time, who was studying, doing PhD studies in computational linguistics in Tokyo, and who also happens to be Ukrainian. Anna very kindly offered to take Zev home on the subway back to his hotel. And in that short 20-minute ride, somehow transpired that Zev told Anna all about this Onski expeditions, about the Kiselgof materials, and how important they are and how important they could be to Jewish music research. And at the end of the subway ride, or subsequently, Anna thought, well, okay, I'm going home this summer. Maybe I'll go check it out. And what she did, she and Mariko worked together to get a letter of invitation from a Japanese university, the university, I think, where Mariko was studying. And Anna went letter in hand to the Vernadsky Library that summer. And she walked in, looked through all the catalogs and found the Kiselgof material. And she also, at the request of Mariko Mishiro, looked for what we call the Machinawetsky wedding manuscript. The curators and archivists in Kiev were very friendly and welcoming to Anna, as far as we know. But they told her, as is often the case, well, we can give you some of this collection, but we can't share everything. So ensued a great deal of transnational emailing between Walter Zev Feldman, who was translating things in Yiddish in Tel Aviv, and Anna, who is in Kiev, and then folks in Japan and New York doing some fundraising to pay for these images to be made. Anna came out with 850 high-resolution photographs of a treasure trove of this material, and she brought it to Yiddish New York in the winter of 2017, and really wanted to make a project out of it. Her most fervent desire was that, unlike so many projects of this nature that have happened, not just in Jewish music, but in all kinds of academic spaces, that this material should not remain hidden, and that since she has gone to Kiev to acquire it, that it should be made publicly available all at once, right from the very beginning, with as little mediation as possible. And so this is something that I also felt quite deeply was important, because, as she says, 100 years is long enough for us to wait to begin to work with this material. And so the project design and the project philosophy of this endeavor is entirely instigated by that philosophy, that this material is the legacy and heritage of Ashkenazic Jewish culture, and it should be made freely available whenever possible. And so we envisioned a project in 3 phases, and that this project should be, from the beginning, open source and community centered. And there's a number of reasons why that would be the case. And the first one is that, first and foremost, that, Anna's one requirement for this project was that everything at once at the beginning. And another part of it is that this work is too much for one person or even a small team of people to handle and to work on in any kind of an expedient way. Unless you're Hannah Ochner. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Our great musicologist Beregowski worked with these materials. He analyzed the Kiselgof collections. He worked on the Machinawetsky materials over the course of his lifetime, and we have great works from them. But what we see here is that there's a lot more to be discovered. And, why wait? Another third part of this project design is that it needed to be accessible to a wide variety of people, and it also had to be, we had to do it on the cheap because this project didn't have any funding. And in some ways that has helped the project, because when you don't have any money, you have to come up with creative solutions. And so the 3 phases of the project very simply are to just disseminate. Phase 1, get it out there, make it public. The only conditions we have on the material as we share it is that it should be always, any derivative work should have attribution to the Vernadsky National Library of Ukraine as the curators and the holders of this material. But other than that, the license is free, and it's free and available for anybody to use, to work with, and to transform. Phase 2 is to transcribe and translate the materials, and that's the phase that Abigail and Hannah have both deeply been involved with. And then phase 3 is kind of what we're doing here at Yiddish Summer Weimar, which is to perform and transform. And so at this moment now we're doing all of these things all together, and it's very exciting because this project officially launched in November of 2020. And in the first, how many months has it been? It's only like 8 months. Let's say let's call it 8 months of this project. Of the 1,400 tunes in the collection, well over 600 have been already digitally notated. So I'm going to read a little quote from Anna that sort of sums up the philosophy of the project and some of the reasons behind it. So she writes, the klezmorim interviewed by Kiselgof were professionals with an eclectic collection of different tunes in their repertoires that let them earn a living generation after generation, adapting to the new tastes and audiences. Their voices faded through numerous social cataclysms, but luckily the archive survived. While these materials are very important for research, their biggest impact is going to be when they return to the fingers of the musicians and the feet of the dancers, when they continue their journey through human hearts. Luckily, we discovered this time capsule in a post-revival time, when there is a generation of new klezmorim more than capable of processing and reviving this repertoire. The communities of Yiddish Summer Weimar, Yiddish New York, Klez Canada, etc., are the real heirs to those who contributed to the archive in the first place. Why not pass on their inheritance and let them develop it further, while helping to create also academic and curated studies? So this statement has a huge amount of really important information in it that has to do with this project. The first is that as the Onski expeditions were going out into the field, they were working in a time in the early 20th century that is unaware of what's going to happen in the First World War, and certainly unaware of what's going to happen in the Second World War. But even so, in 1912, 1913, 1914, Europe is on the verge, is in the midst of a huge transition into modernity. We have waves of immigrants going to North America and elsewhere. We have cultural shifts are happening, and you can sense in the materials that we see that these klezmorim, these professional musicians, were also feeling in some ways that their life was also changing, their world was changing. And so what we think that we have and what we think that we see is that some of our pieces of music just say von alte klezmerische Noten, right, from old klezmer notations. And it's entirely possible, in fact, quite likely, we think that just some of these musicians just gave over old music notations, that maybe they didn't need them anymore. Maybe they were from a lost relative. We don't really know. We don't have a lot of background information. But as Anna writes, this is a time capsule for us. It catches us before the modernity that enters and transforms after the First World War is upon us. And the other part of it, another part of that we see is that we are interacting with, we're able to restore individual musicians and individual people through the view of looking at these manuscripts. For example, we have a fellow named Motto Reder, who we believe he gave his whole musical notebook to the Kiselgof team. In 1913, when the Kiselgof project came through Dubno, Motto Reder was 70 years old and he was a professional klezmer. And he handed over his notebook. And so when we read it as musicians, it's like reading his diary. It's like we get to think, so here's a bunch of Bulgars. I wonder where they came from. Oh, look, there's some jokes. And why did he put that mazurka? And do we know that from somewhere else? And so unlike other kinds of collections where somebody like Beregovsky would say, put all of the skochnas all together from this person, that person, that person. So we have sections divided by genre. In this collection, we have sections that are divided by people. And so it gives you a much better and much closer sense to the humans that are behind the music. The last part of this, before I start bringing in Abigail and Hannah, is the idea that this project is for us and by us in some ways. And what I mean by that is by klezmorim, for klezmorim, by klezmorim. We have these telegrams to the future in these notes. If Motto Reder is handing over his notebook to this esteemed Professor Kiselgof from a faraway town of St. Petersburg, he was handing this material into the future. And we think, we can speculate, we might hope that he was hoping that a klezmer would find it. And that's who we have here. And that this, and we talked about this a little bit this morning, but there's, you pick up a music manuscript. And if it was Scottish music, I might not know how to interpret it. I might not know how to play it in a way that was authentic to the intention of the author. But because of the klezmer revival, because of 40 years of research by musicians and scholars to understand the music of 20th century and 19th century and 20th century klezmer, Jewish music, Ashkenazic music. We, as musicians, have the skills and the knowledge to be able to bring this music to life. And I think that Anna really hit it on the head when she makes the connection between the musicians of 1912, 1914, and the musicians of today. And I think that's what makes this project very powerful for us as musicians. So I'd like to introduce Abigail Riceman, who's a fantastic violinist and who is part of the traditional ensemble here, and Hannah Ochner. I'm going to say a couple more words. Yes, almost right on time, which is great. Which is that I think that I met both of these people in the course of arranging our first big KMDMP event. The first big event was a 30-hour marathon. We called it a digitize-a-thon. And we called it that because transcribing, we were going to call it a transcribe-a-thon, but it's not quite accurate. And we know, if we know anything in the world of Jewish music, we know that if you don't use the right words, somebody's going to call you out. So we called it a digitize-a-thon, even though it's a very funny word. We had 2 Zoom rooms going for 30 hours. We started at after Shabbos in Europe on a Saturday evening, and we went through till Sunday evening in New York the following day. We had hosts, klezmorim from all around the world taking hour-long slots, and yiddishists. And we just invited people to come in and check out the collection. And that's what happened. And we were actually really blown away. By the end of that event, we had 175 people had turned up to tune in some way and participate in that event. So I think what I want to do is hand it over to you, Abigail, and you can both probably pass this mic around and talk about it. But I know that you were involved in a big translation session about one of the Mac pieces. So I'm going to hand you the mic. Pry it out of my thing. But I'd love to have you tell us about Machinawetsky and what you know about him, and then your relationship with him and this whole big translation thing that we're talking about.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that was wonderful. I love hearing you talk about it. Like I know all the things, but it's great to hear it all at the same time. So that's really nice. I just have to say personally, this project has been really exciting for me as a fiddler, as a violinist, because there's so much violin repertoire in there, and it's very exciting. I remember when, I think it was actually Joel Rubin at one of the digitization weekends and Steve Greenman, they showed a tune that was Galicianer Tanz by Schlemke Beckerman. That's how we know it, his recording, but it was Makonovetsky's version of it. Maybe the original, I don't know. Who's to say? But
we're just calling them versions.
They're versions.
There's no original versions.
No original.
Versions.
Yes, versions. So anyways, there's all of these open A strings within the melody, which didn't exist when Schlemke Beckerman played it, because why would a clarinetist do that? So yeah, I was extremely excited because that's one of my favorite tunes. It always has been. When I saw that tune, and then I kept going with Makonovetsky and just being like, whoa, the violin repertoire just exploded. Because we have Beregovsky, we have, a lot of stuff from New York where there isn't a lot of violin repertoire at all. And we have the Kostakowski. Did I say that right?
Sure.
Yeah. But nothing like so violin specific, I think, like this.
Yeah, let me take, just quickly, I've talked a lot about Kiselgof and these Onski Expeditions. Mariko Mishiro requested specifically that Anna look for the Machinawetsky wedding manuscript and to bring that back if she could. And she was very interested in, she's a PhD candidate, she's studying klezmer wedding repertoire. So the idea of a big manuscript that had wedding music was very appealing to her. This is a book of 270 pages approximately of handwritten material by Machinawetsky. He wrote it out specifically for Beregovsky. And what we see in there are, as Abigail is saying, like lots of little 2-part, 3-part dance tunes, but then there are these ginormous 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 page concerto-like pieces or just etudes, very, very lengthy pieces of different varieties. What we do know about Machinawetsky, people can look up a short article about him in the Jewish Instrumental Folk Music by Bergovsky's Volume 4. The Kurt Bierling edition has a nice version of this chapter. What we know about Machinawetsky is that he was born into a poor klezmer family and was a musician, but he was never quite satisfied with the music that was playing in his small town. And he was a striver, and he was seeking constantly to better himself. And so he wrote off to, he couldn't go to conservatory for whatever reasons, we don't know why, but he never made it to a conservatory, though I'm sure he would have wanted to go to one. But he wrote off to get the Berriot classical classical methods of the day, and he wrote off to get etudes and studies so that he could improve his violin playing. And what we see in the manuscript is him blending together these very, very purely Jewish elements along with classical music. So back over to you.
Yeah, and along with that, something that I was excited about as well was seeing his bowings. That was like really big for me because we don't have that as fiddlers, and it's so important. Bowings, meaning, are there slurs, are there ups and downs, where do you put it? The only thing that we have from the old country are recordings, and I spend hours on 1 second of music trying to figure out what the bowing is, because it's so important. It's bowings are consonants, they're words, and you're speaking through this music, and if you're changing your bow, it changes the sound. So I'm really, really excited to see bowings and also ornaments as well. He doesn't have, I think he kind of has an ornament for a crèche. It's basically just like a grace note, but sometimes it's actually just a grace note. But then mordants as well. So that was all very exciting for me to see. And also just the way that he writes, you can actually see the phrases. Like the way that I write down music, I space it in a way that shows how to play it, especially for pieces that are rubato, like a Kalabazets and a Doina. You know, I don't love reading them from digitized music. I like reading it from the handwriting, and I mostly read all the Makonovetsky stuff from his handwriting because I know he did it, and I know he wrote it down for people like me, which that's
It's amazing.
like if he were here, if he knew, like I think he would be really happy with what we were doing. So but anyways, I happened to open up with the first thing that I did was I opened up one of his books, and it happened to be the 6th one because I was like, I don't think anybody will start from the end. It was the very last heft of everything, the last notebook, and I was like, I'll start here. And I opened it up, and there was like a novel of Yiddish, and I was like, I have to know what this says, because he's like writing about this piece. And as I kept going with Makonovetsky stuff, I'm like, whoa, here's another novel. Here's another novel. So my whole thing of the digitization is like, I'm going to find as many Yiddishes as possible and make them translate this. And that's what I did.
So cool. So let me hand out, let's talk to Hannah for just a second. Yeah, we'll give you a second to cool down. We'll get ready for our reading here, because I know Hannah was involved in this session as well. Hannah has been a key, like a core participant in this project right from the very beginning. And we've been saying this all week, but I'll say it again. Hannah has to date digitized something, I think over 300 pieces of music from the collection, which is just sort of a staggering feat of just persistence and carrying on. So my question to you, Hannah, is like, what keeps you coming back to these tunes to keep digitizing them and keep notating them?
Many reasons. Abigail already touched on it. There's like lots of new material that we get to know by looking at it. It's also, I find also interesting, is a bit like what Abigail described with the Galatian Tanz, to find pieces that we know in different versions, and sometimes even in many versions throughout the material. Then we can compare what we have and what it could be, because often we only have one recording of something, and it just gives us like a new perspective on all of that. And it kind of just happened a bit because I like doing it, but it's also I think it's important to make it accessible for people, because the Machinawetsky you can read from the page relatively well, but a lot of it you cannot just read. If I put the manuscript in front of you, it's hard to read that. So by making the actual digitizations, and since we're putting them up on the KMDMP website, everybody who just wants to get a taste of what the tunes are can do it easily without having to work through this whole process first. So yeah.
Keep going.
Along with that, I digitized a tune. I think it was from the Motul Raider, and I couldn't see some of the notes because there were stamps. Like I can't remember what stamps they were.
They're the stamps for. I think the one you're talking about is the end of the Raider heft. They're like, I think I found out from Sasha that they're stamps. The page had been torn. The page is quite torn and wrinkly, and they used stamps, basically a Scotch tape to put it back together, but the stamps themselves are little, they're the stamps that you bought that you show that you had paid your membership dues to the Communist Party. Yeah, I think we have that confirmed. So, and Hannah, I can't find it here in the thing, but Hannah's, one of Hannah, you want to find it? Hannah has a piece of music that she's notated that looked like, I don't know if somebody wants to, if you can hold this up to the camera or make it visible in some way. We'll make it visible later. It looks like somebody took a piece of paper and like just folded it up into, like almost crumpled it up in a ball and then straightened it out again. And somehow Hannah managed to make sense out of this particularly challenging piece of music. And so there's a lot of riddle making in that one. But let's see, I think, but yeah, you were in on some of these translation sessions as well. Yeah. And so I want to hear you, Hannah, also talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about just the work on the text and how that goes when you're working, working by yourself or working groups, and how that works and what seems to be the best method to work on this text.
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of like small pieces of text, like titles. This we usually just the person who digitizes it does it if they can read Yiddish. But these longer text passages that Abigail we talked about that mostly happen in Makonovetsky. It's very useful to do it as a group. So we had these, I think every 2 weeks we did like a translation session. It's kind of a core team of like 3 or 4 people, and everybody else who turned up, and we would take a passage of text and tackle it. And I think we, at some point, like in the first one, we finished your bit that was left over from digitizing. But yeah, it's very useful because it's very idiosyncratic, especially Makonovetsky, how he writes, first of all, in terms of spelling, in terms of how he writes some letters. They're a bit strange, like kind of a very specific type of handwriting. And he also has this stream of consciousness way of writing. So there's like this amount of text, and there's not a single period in the whole thing. So you have to figure out where does the sentence end, which bit belongs to what, like what does this verb refer to, and this kind of thing. So it's very useful to be with a group of people to have to actually discuss and not just say, I'm not sure what that means, but just say, okay, then the other person has an idea, or there's Russian speakers with us usually, which is very useful because sometimes he just writes a word in Russian, or sometimes it is a word in Yiddish, but it's a Russian word, and I wouldn't know because my Russian is very limited, but Sasha and Ruben, for example, know very well. So that's how translation works best, in our opinion, at least.
I've observed some of these sessions, and you'll hear, everybody's sort of, it's in that tiled vision of the Zoom room. And sometimes even everybody's just looking at the text on their own computer, their own screen. So you don't even see the text on the screen, and you just see a lot of silence, people looking and thinking. And then somebody will say, could it be this? And somebody will be like, is that a lamed, or is it a kuf, or is it a longa, and then there'll be some more silence, and then somebody will be like, is it that? And then people, oh yeah, it could be that, and it's like a great, it's like little puzzle hunts. They're like it's like puzzling somehow, I think, in a group. Yeah. Yeah, the picture becomes clear. So yeah, do you want to read the results of one of these epic?
This was the first one that
It was at some crazy hour, it was like 3 o'clock. in the
Yeah,
morning,
well, I think it
Pacific
was.
Coast time.
I think it was like, yeah, it started getting pretty late. I think I left at one point. I was like, I need to sleep.
Yeah.
It was like midnight or 1 a.m. or something, East Coast time. Yeah, so this is the first one I believe that I saw. Is it half six?
Yeah, this is,
Yeah.
this is the log practice, with the waltz and the whole thing, yeah.
Do we want me to do it in a little Yiddish or no?
I think you,
Maybe a little Yiddish?
just go ahead and.
My Yiddish is very rusty, but we'll see. Der Wals ist nicht zum... You want to read it?
I don't know. If you don't want, I can read it.
Let's do that. You read the Yiddish and Anna will do a check and we'll read the English.
So I think these are, as I said, so this is all in one bit, but there's two different things he's talking about. The first thing is about how you play a waltz, or like this specific waltz, and then later he talks about why the material is as it is and what happened to it. So if it doesn't make sense to you at some point in the meantime, this is just how he writes. So, okay, I'll read that. Der Wals ist nicht zum Tanzen, noch zum Herren. Wals. Diesen Wals spielt man nach dem Charakter, wie jeder versteht, wie ablassen die Tempe, wo vergichern, wie still, wo verstarken, weil kein Peschattne ist nicht gewähnt bei mir, in Assa ist der Masur, spielt sich nach dem Natur, wie man versteht. So that was the first bit. Do you want to read the translation of that, or should I go on?
Sure.
Because the
I'll
other
let
thing
you
is
do the
it's a
other-
different...
Yeah.
I'm gonna get that over. Okay. And I should say the transcription, well, we'll say who it all is by in a minute. Okay. This waltz is to be played according to its character. Everybody understands where to go out of strict time, where to speed up, where to play softly, and where to become stronger. Because I had no printed music, and in the same way, the mazur is also played naturally as one understands it. Of course, everybody knows.
Yeah,
That's what he does. That's yeah.
Oh, Mazur too.
Yeah.
Sure. Mazurka also.
That's how the whole thing is. So okay, so now that's the second bit that is different in terms of context. So. Jetzt habe ich geendigt mein Schreiben euch Noten und ob ihr seid zufrieden von sie, schreibt mir sie noch schicken. Ich wollte euch geschickt die alten Noten, aber sie seien sehr zerrissene. Es fehlt viel und ihr werdet gar nicht herausnehmen von sie. Weil in die banditske Zeiten seien sie gelegen, wie ihr Wert in der Erde und Wasser und Schnee. Und viel hat man zerrissen. Die Banditen und die Mais und die Moll mit alles haben sie gelitten von der klagendigen Zeiten. Der Pfarrer muss ich schreiben, weil ich gedenk noch sehe, weil ich hab sie gespielt. Verzeiht was nicht mit kein schwarzen Tint, weil es ist nicht bei uns. Adieu mit chavischen Grüßen, Avram Yehoshua Makonovetsky. So this is the last thing he writes, like right here.
And this is, the date on this is like April 14th, 1938. And we'll tell more about that in the end, but here's the English.
Now I finished my writing out the music for you, and if you are satisfied with it, write to me so that I can send you more. I would have sent you the old transcriptions, but they are very torn. A lot is missing, and you would not be able to get anything out of it. Because in the bandit times, they lay where they were, in the dirt and water and snow, and got all torn up. They suffered from the bandits and the mice and moths, and all in those lamentable times. So I have to write them out, because I remember them from having played them, but not in black ink, because we don't have any here. Adieu, with friendly, comradely greetings, Avraham Yeshua Machinawetsky.
Yeah. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful text. And so when we think about these telegrams to the future, we know that this person, Machinawetsky, who had worked for his entire life to like improve his playing and to elevate his playing, also had a vision to make sure that this music was remembered. So he's writing here to Berezovsky, he's corresponding with Beragossi and saying, I hope you are pleased with what I've done here, and these are the conditions. It's hard to imagine what it was like in 1938, where he was writing this to Beragosky, who then defended his dissertation in Moscow in 1944. Of all miraculous things. So for us to have access to this material it's really a priceless treasure, because of all of the effort that went into making them happen. It didn't just happen. It didn't just happen that we have these things. It happened that there was a wealthy banker who responded to the request from Onski and from Kiselgof to send out these collecting expeditions. It depends on Beragosky working through the 1920s after the revolution and into the Second World War to write his dissertation, to make these things come together and to do his field work. And then it comes to the perseverance of a very plucky and really phenomenal young woman, Anna Rogers, to go to Kiev and to acquire this material. And so for us, this group work is like very exciting because it's actually really fun to work together. And there's really something for everybody here. If you have a little bit of Yiddish, you can come to a translation session and hang out and learn some more and just be part of the group. If you are a musician, you can digitize one tune and you can be part of the project, or you can play a tune and be part of the project, or you can take a tune and say, I like this tune, but I'm going to make a new composition based on this tune. So there's really something for everybody here. And as an exemplar of that, this work, so we have two sets of people. First was the work to transliterate the text from handwritten Yiddish into Latin alphabet. And that group included Sorla Chiritescu, Sasha Luria, Hannah Ochner, Rosa Daniel Lang-Levitsky, Mark Slobin, Dan Slobin, Reuven Zaslavsky, Bob Blacksberg, and Jutta Bogen. So talk about a group effort. And then from that session, it was started in January, Transcribe-a-thon or Digitize-a-thon, and finished in a translation session like some months later. Then another group stayed on after and did the English translation of the Yiddish. And that was Sasha Luria, Hannah Ochner, Rosa Daniel Lang-Levitsky. The three of them came up with this sort of rough English translation. And so I think we're getting close to the end here. I want to leave us a little bit of time to play. Do you have any questions? You sitting in the room. Okay, sure. Okay, and then I will ask anybody who is on the online space, if there's anybody tuning in from online space, if anybody from online space has a question, please feel free to put it in the comments or put it in the chat, and that will be relayed to us here, if there are any. And I think what we'd like to do is maybe play a little piece of music, because we have a few minutes left. Yeah. I'll see if there's anything else that we need to sort of cover, but basically, this project is, as I've tried to explain, it's really, there's something here for everybody, whether you're a Yiddishist or whether you're a musician, and whether or not you're deeply inside of Yiddish culture or whether you're just getting close to it. This is a great way to come in. And we're always inviting people to come in. And we'll be over at Klezmer Institute after we finish our work here at Yiddish Summer Weimar. This work will continue. We have more events coming up, more of these digitize-a-thon events. And as the world opens up and we get past the Corona times, we're hoping to put on performances of this music in various ways. Alan's new music ensemble here at Yiddish Summer Weimar has already done phenomenal work with some of these tunes to transform them into something that we hope that Mr. Makonovetsky would be very proud of and very delighted to hear, right? So we're going to play because so the thing we haven't really talked about so much, because we're really in the weeds of digitally notating and transcribing and transliterating, is the fact that the music is actually awesome. The music is absolutely outstanding. So we're going to play a couple of tunes. The first one is, we're calling it the Belf's Buffetlein Chussedel. because it feels to me a little bit like this is a lost Belf recording. If anybody knows who the Belf Orchestra was, they recorded between, right around the time period of this of the Onski Expeditions. To me, it sounds a little bit like a lost Belf recording. So, and then the second one, we have decided to name Hanna Skoczna, because this is the piece that came from that crumpled up piece of paper that Hanna managed to make sense of.
Maybe if we have time, we could do the Gassenstickle since we talked about it.
We could. Do you remember it?
Yes.
Oh, yes. She's like, yes, I have it. Okay.
But
I have it. I have it here somewhere.
I don't know how much I have the Belf one in Flanders, but
You want to skip that and just do the shtickle? And do the Skoczna?
let's start with the Stickle then maybe.
Okay.
I would.
Sure. I can
Do you want me to take this off?
Whatever for you is
Do we have any questions coming in, Alan?
Not yet, but
Okay.
I think in 10 minutes you'll ask.
Okay.
If that gives you enough
Yeah.
time to play.
Do you have any people there?
No,
they
yes,
can
we
put
do.
it on
I
there.
think-
Okay. I'm just gonna grab a chair. Will this mess up everything?
Oh, you have the music.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, then I can play anything. I didn't even realize you had the music.
We can also play the spooky flowers.
Yeah.
Is this in your way for her if it's there? I just want it there as just a tiny bit of a crouch.
Oh, there it is.
There it is.
Awesome. Nice. This is the Makonovetsky Gassenstickle.
Oh, also has a great translation thing.
Yes.
This is yes. Fate's right. Hannah, do you wanna say a little bit about this?
Yeah, but I need to read what it actually says.
Do you wanna grab the microphone for her?
Can they hear?
Oh, here. The microphone?
Oh, sure. I don't have hands to do this.
I can.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, yeah. So as we said, like many of these pieces have like little bits of text, not as long as the one we just read, but like just like 1 or 2 lines that, because it's this wedding manuscript, that provide the context when you would have played that. And for this Gassenstickle, the text above the tune says, a Gassenstickle, in brackets Schockel, mit dem Nigen fleckt man opferen nach der Nacht Tag am Mechitten zurück heim, Intergetränken und freilich getanzt zum Takt nach dem Spiel von dem Nigen, was sie rufen ihm 1, 2, 3. So I'll try to translate that. It's very stream of consciousness. It's it doesn't work in English very well. So first it gives the title, it's a Gassenstickle, so like a street tune, something you play while people are walking. Or in brackets Schockel, it's not really a shock, but who knows. And then it says, with this tune, one escorts at night, or Fahrtag, like basically at dawn, I guess that means. You escort the in-laws at home. And either the people are drunk or they're drinking while they're doing it. This is grammatically not clear here. But they're also dancing at the same time to the rhythm of the music. And yeah, it sounds like they call the tune 1, 2, 3, but it is in 3. So I think what it means is that's how they count it in, or how they clap to it or something like that. So yeah, you can see it's not the most straightforward text.
A faster one?
Yeah, and this is Hannah's Skoczna. You don't need it.
Yeah.
Should we do one more? Do we have any questions? If there's questions, we'll, no questions. Okay.
That means that we did a great job of explaining everything.
Either that or, well, could be anything.
It's fine, guys.
I guess it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Should we?
You play another tune?
Do you want to do the spookies? Or do you want to do which one you feel better about, spookies or the Belf?
I mean, spooky is super fun.
Let's do spookies. Okay, good. Then I feel better about spookies.
Okay, so since we have a couple of few minutes here, we'll just talk a little bit more. Teeny, I know I like to talk, but one of the big issues in klezmer music is that everything there's probably a lot of very good reasons for this, and culturally informed reasons that people more experienced than I could explain, but in klezmer music, things tend to not have specific names. Many pieces don't have a specific name. It's just like tune, dance, freilichs, skoczna, jok, but you could have 20 different pieces that are all titled jok, or that are all titled skoczna or freilichs. And so, once we can't, it's hard to just remember. It's hard enough to remember our silly numbering system that we've developed in order to be able to keep track of who's working on what. But it's just as hard trying to remember, well, Freilichs, but which one? Which one are you talking about? And so as humans, we like to put little pieces, we need to build a memory palace. And so, that Freilichs that we played at that one concert. In the olden days, perhaps, you wouldn't need to know a name. You would say, that's the one that Michal dances to. So, we'll play for Michal, we'll play the one that person always likes to dance to. And then if you have a lead klezmer player and all the rest of the people in the band they're not involved in the choice of tunes. So it doesn't really matter what the tune is called because it exists in the mind of the klezmer. Whoever's leading the band calls the tunes, and they don't necessarily need names for them that they're going to have to share with anybody else. They just start playing. right? But in the 21st century, we're a little bit more democratic in how we arrange things, and we like to, let people help pick what tune we're going to play. We're not quite so hierarchical in our situations. I'm just waiting until the bells stop ringing so that we can play.
C sharp?
C sharp. Anyone? Yeah, right. So since we have 1,400 odd tunes in this collection, and we're starting to be like, good old number 1676, that one, right? I know we're referring 973 and 1420, like that's certainly, we can, high nerdery, high geek factor and all of that. We've also just decided to start naming things because it's fun, and also it just helps you remember which tune is which. So this one, in our trad ensemble workshop, we started calling it the Spooky Frelix, not because it's particularly spooky, but it sort of feels like it wants to be spooky. It's trying to be spooky, not quite succeeding. It's a little bit like Casper the Friendly Ghost of klezmer tunes.
Bells ring for a very long time.
I know, they have a lot of bells
5
here.
minutes? They really want you to know. That's wild. Well,
the other tune has a lot of C sharp.
I know. Oh yeah. It's not really C sharp though. Well, dissonance. That's what it's about.
Okay.
Hey, say, die, here.
Thank you. This reminds me, this tune has a very Ukrainian point of view. This tune. I think it's called Frelix or something. But when you listen to it, when you play it, it really has a very Ukrainian sort of vibe to it. And it reminds me that another thing that's really neat, particularly special about seeing these individuals, Motorreder, Komediant Hershkovitz, Mr. Machinawetsky, Avram Machinawetsky, is that, like I said, we see them as whole musical people, more so than we see in the collections. And as much as we revere Moshe Beregovsky as a teacher, as a person who was able to interpret the Jewish music that he was perceiving, because he was that much closer to it, in a way that is we're much more distant to it, just by time. Temporally, we are distant. But he also he made choices, and he had a point of view. And while we respect those things, what we see is a little bit behind the curtain. when we can see the pool, the bigger pool from which he made his choices and from which he made his selections. And we know that Beregovsky's mission was to find the Jewishness, to find the klezmer, the most Jewish things in the collections, and then to organize and to understand them. And when we look through the Kiselgof collections, we see that these klezmorim had much bigger musical repertoires than we might have thought. And that the music that's represented there has all kinds of things that a little bit unexpected. There are mazurkas, there are polkas, there are polka mazurs, there are some polonaise, there's waltz, there's quadrille, and little bits of popular songs of the day that are sort of sprinkled through. And then we have tunes like this that have this very Ukrainian sort of perspective. So we see that these klezmorim, we don't know, we don't have the view of where they would have played this music, but we know that it was present in their repertoires, and I remember hearing in Marmurish that even at a Jewish wedding in Marmurish in the 60s or 70s, of course they wanted the Jewish music, but they also wanted waltzes, and they also wanted foxtrot, and all of these other kinds of music. So we can imagine that in the working life of a klezmer from then, what's that?
There's also Fischer's hornpipe is in there.
Yeah, right.
So that's like a...
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so that in the working life of klezmer, we could have Fischer's hornpipe.
Nope, I don't know where it goes. Sorry, fiddlers.
Yeah. But something, and I think that this was sort of an international hit of its day, Sure. And so if these were new tunes coming through, of course you write them down because you're like, oh, I heard that new tune, I got to write it down. And so it's really exciting to discover, like, what did you say? There's opera.
Yeah, like there's this, what's this called, the Torero song from Carmen is there, like as a march. I think
There's a piece that clearly quotes a Mozart, the Mozart piano piece, the Turk. Yeah, alla Turca, yeah. It literally goes da 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 da, and then it does something else. Yeah. I was like, how do I know this? Oh.
It sounds so familiar, right? So it's going to be a real joy for us to continue on with this project and to continue discovering, because I mentioned, and we're so delighted that in 8 months we have almost half of the collection has already been digitally notated, which is just astonishing. It's astonishing. Thanks. Hannah is a huge part of this, but there are, I know, half of the half. Yeah. But we also have like really, I don't know if it's 100 people, but probably 50, 60, maybe 70 different people who have contributed notations to this project. And, so now we have even another couple of years ahead of us to keep working on this material and discovering things. Once we start getting this full picture and that everything has been touched and everything has been looked at, I think we'll be starting to really learn a lot more about these people, about these musicians, about the music that they played. And we're very hopeful that also in the future we'll be able to request from the Vernadsky Library some of the other material that we don't have. There's a huge collection of song material, written text with song texts, and also written songs, the music of songs that were not part of the 26 notebooks that we have in our particular project. And we're hoping that we can begin to work with that material too, so that this digital notation project can carry on into the future. Yeah, I think that's good.
Well, I want to thank the three of you, Abigail and Christina and Hannah, for this amazing presentation. Christina, I've heard you talking about this 5 or 6 times now, and it's like the first time every time. Yeah, and that has a lot to do with the fact that you're so obviously in love with this and moved by this, and all of you here, I noticed that there was a tear in your eye when you were talking about Makonovetsky, and it's very interesting that we're talking about things that scholars talk about in serious academic conferences, and we talk about it that way, but we also cry when we're talking about it because we feel what it means that somebody 110 years ago took time to write something down, and here we are today, we're playing it. And there are many things that we keep from that time, and there are other things that we have changed and revolutionized. I think one revolutionary thing is that the 3 klezmer musicians who played today for us are all women. And I think this is a very positive change. And thank you for being among the pioneers who are making that happen. Very, very important. And yes, tomorrow we're going to be interviewing this session. Well, first of all, I want to thank again Craig Udelman for being a very strong force behind having Yiddish Summer Weimar this year, having some streamed content. The principle of Yiddish Summer Weimar has always been to meet in person and to have in-person exchanges, but we realized that this year, like for the last couple of years, that in-person meeting is not possible for everyone, and we wanted to open the window or the door a little bit and let people be part of this world, let people have a feeling, and for us to contact the people outside as well, so that it's not just a little enclosed, safe space here. We hope that all of you out there in the world stay safe and are glad that you could join us. Tomorrow we're going to be, Ludmila Sholachova will be giving a lecture, and she's a very important person in the history of discovering this archive and realizing that it still exists, that it has survived the war. And let me just think quickly. Yes, there are other things that we're streaming. If the weather permits, we'll be streaming a concert of the Song Project. Maybe I'll just say a word about that. That part of the idea of Yiddish Summer Weimar is that each summer has a special subject, and that as much as possible of the activities of the summer rotate around that project, revolve around that project. And so we actually put together 2 new creative music projects, one a song project and one an instrumental music project. And we've heard a piece of the instrumental project here. The song project includes Sasha Luria, Sveta Kundish, Patrick Farrell, Craig Udelman, which is why he's not here today, Lawrence Glamberg, and Paulina Shepard. And if weather permits, they'll be starting their concert in about 1 hour and 15 minutes, and we'll be streaming that. And if weather does not permit that, then we're going to find another time and place to be able to put that online. But what we see there is also a contemporary reworking of this material, inspired by the material. I think it's phenomenal what they've come up with. I've heard them in rehearsal, absolutely phenomenal. And we will be doing an instrumental music project again, weather permitting, tomorrow night. And you can just basically take a look at our website and see all the streamed content. So to those of you who joined us in person, thank you very much. And again, to Christina, to Hannah, and Abigail, thank you very much for your talking and for your openness to us and for your beautiful playing, for all those things together. And have a good evening, everybody.